Hi everyone, welcome to Legends and Lore Season 3, Episode 2. And I'm Anna B. Meyer, and I'm the usual co-host, one of the usual co-hosts, but Mike bailed on me this week for some unknown reasons that he might have to suffer for in the future. We'll see. So with me is Brian Bloomklotz. Welcome.
Hello,
Th-
and thank you for inviting me.
yeah, thank you so much for saving my bacon this week. It's really because if I'm trying to do this myself and just babble, that will be terrible. I've tried not this show, but I tried my own Twitch stream, just doing it by myself, and it's kind of yeah, it's not a recipe for success, that's for sure. And it looks like we have a really good turnout in chat and lots of awesome people in chat. So welcome so much. And Minnie, my sidekick, is here, and she's not making too much of a fuss yet. So that's good. So how are you doing, Brian? Here's 100 degrees roughly.
96-ish, 97. Yeah,
Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
which is wilting weather in Portland. We're used to rain.
Yeah. Yeah. We are
We
kind
don't
of.
we don't yeah we don't tan so much as rust up here,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's been an interesting couple of days. It's gonna come back to a more reasonable 70-75 by the weekend,
Yeah, yeah,
which
we
will
had
be nice.
105 yesterday, so it's perfect time weather
Ugh.
to sit inside and work, so to speak, and do things. So we put a little bit cryptic. I tried to make a little bit of a spin of this week's. We Mike and me had talked about doing Saltmarsh, and but my book will come tomorrow or Friday, so I haven't read much about it. So I've only read little pieces that people have sent me and images and stuff. So I haven't read the book yet. So that's good that we didn't have happen this week, but it will happen soon. And then we tried to get Shane on the show, but he was an almost show, so we'll see if he comes soon. So I'm so glad that Brian came, and we kind of got a spin on a couple of things, and one of them is Alyssa. That Brian has some cool theories and ideas and stuff, and I love Alyssa, and I've ran a campaign there for some years, so that's one of them. And then I wanted to just a few touch up. I haven't done much progress in mapping, but I would love to talk a little bit more about mapping Earth as a whole, so to speak, and have a little bit of topping and talk about that because it's kind of something that I know I will spend now mostly in thought and planning and stuff, but this fall I need to start kind of nailing down my version of Earth, not in detail, but in overall. So there's some ideas and stuff, and there's so many other cool attempts and ideas and people doing interesting things in this direction. So I want to comment about it. But first, Brian, tell me anything new, cool, what you've been working on, or any cool Greyhawk related projects you've been tied up in.
Well, I've been reading through Saltmarsh. I know we're not going to talk about today. I mean, one
Mm-hmm.
of the reasons I suggested the Southern Province slash Alyssa as a topic is that there is a tangent there. The Styes adventure that was originally in Dungeon Magazine, which is in Ghost of Saltmarsh, the new adventure from Wizards of the Coast, was, I believe, according to Mike, who's not here to confirm this for me,
Yeah, we'll see next week.
um,
Yep.
I believe he said in his last Greyhawkery pieces that Primp was originally the city the Styes was a district of.
Aha.
Now the nice thing about Saltmarsh is the Styes is set up where you can just drop it anywhere where you need like a really rundown, crazy dock place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a plenty of places you can put that
Yeah.
around the
Yeah.
Sea Princes and Keelland if you want to put it there. But I was kind of curious about Primp, so I started reading, which took me to Alyssa, which took me to the South Province, which put me into Ivid, the Undying, and I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh
And so
yeah.
since yeah,
It's.
so since I already knew you ran a campaign
Mm-hmm.
nearby
Yeah.
there, I
Yeah.
figure why not talk about what I was just recently reading,
Yeah.
and you already have a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of stuff,
Yep.
which is your own personal campaign plus the stuff you read. So that
Yep.
that should be an interesting topic that you and I can talk about, and
Yeah.
we won't be
Yeah.
like,
We had a
that kind
brief one yesterday, and we went down to rabbit holes, and 3 hours later we kind of yeah. So this is
of.
so much fun.
Primp to talk about rabbit holes. Primp took me to the Oer Spelljammer supplement, which took me to Selene, which gave me a theory about where the elves came from on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I was all over the map yesterday and the day before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my brain tends to wander when I start doing research.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally I dig up some interesting ideas, and
Yeah.
occasionally I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, so we should have fun. Yeah.
So you mentioned Primp a bunch of times. So let me just show over the map because we probably have a few in the audience here who are not really sure where Primp is. So here we have the Flanies, and here on the northern coast of the Elysian Plains, what was the
Yep.
heartlands of both the old kingdom of Alyssa, that was the old Flan precursor of before everything kind of gotten going with the Great Kingdom and stuff, and then it was the coast of the South Province when it was during the Great Kingdom days, and now it's again in if you follow the Living Greyhawk campaign, then it becomes a province of the United Kingdom of Alyssa again. And the city is here; it's a port city, Primp, and the heraldry here is my heraldry. I created it. It
Oh, I
was
was just about to ask you that.
yeah,
It's like I haven't seen that one
yep.
before. I'm like,
It's my
it's
heraldry.
very thematic.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's very thematic for the region.
Yeah, it's
So
I just took it. It's a bit of I followed the colors of I used the colors of Alyssa, the yellow, and then I took the green from the United Kingdom of Alyssa, and also the old Alyssa had the green, and they had the three alchemical bombs. So I made a version with these three dots in it. So
mhm.
it's playing with the my usual style, and it's one of the few heraldries that is mine that I actually put on the because there is none other I could find. So I put mine that I've developed for my campaign on the map, and I haven't heard any negative comments. So we'll see. It seems to be accepted in the community now. So at least I haven't got that much in the form of
So
negative.
it's a perfectly valid coat of arms. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and it fits within the theme of that region. I have no problem with it.
It's not
Um,
too
yeah,
fanciful, meaning fantasy wise that way. But on the other hand, I won't. They might be practical merchants and just wanted to have it. But on the other hand, there might be greedy ones who want to have lots of stuff. So I kind of So I just went with it. It was more of an impulse. I needed something for my campaign that there were from Primp, so I just created that one
yeah,
afternoon and put it on my campaign map. And then I was like, it might be good enough to put on the general map. So I put them there. So that was the. But now let's go back again
frankly,
to the
yeah,
kind of the
right.
general story here.
Well, if we go back to um, the box set and the folio,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a whole lot of information. I mean, the fief of Alyssa
Yeah,
is basically subsumed into the southern province.
yeah, it's listed under
It's
under
basic.
Southern Province. Yeah,
Yeah, they don't give you a whole lot other than that.
it's
Pull up
this
my own.
much.
I'm
So
pulling up the
it's
Darling map, so I say the
yeah.
proper area.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
the South Province was originally Onwall, ID. I think I'm saying that right. The county of Sundee.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
yeah, it used to, and then,
and
but it actually, the
yeah.
interesting thing is, I read this a couple hours ago, and during lunch,
Mm-hmm.
and the interesting thing is that the Herzog of the South Province, he is in bad standing because he lost most of when the gazetteer,
Right.
he lost all the this is only the core land, so it's basically what is today in my campaign the province of Elissa. That was what the South Province was down to, the core lands of. So let's go back to the map again. So the core lands. So basically, I need to move my mouse over to. So basically, this area here, the plains here, and up to the Telly, and then also some bit this part here seemed to belong to the South Province because it was the lands alongside the Telly down towards Pontiville. Pontilver, it was also part of the
It,
South
it,
Province.
it's really not clear
No,
where
it's
the
yeah,
border of in the original stuff. Now,
yeah.
if you look at the Greyhawk Wars box set or you look at later material, it tends to solidify the border along the Thelly River
Mm-hmm. Yep,
for South Province.
yep.
Now, but they're making reference to the Sea of
Medigia, yeah,
Metagia,
that was part of the
basically taking
of.
over a
Hmm.
portion of their lands.
Yep.
But that doesn't make any sense unless the South Province kind of curves down
Yeah,
towards it.
that's what I've
So
said.
yeah,
That this area that is south of the Teli was part of the South Province too, and then the Sea of Medegia was. But then most of that was lost, and then so he was in bad standing. And I guess it was a kind of a build up. Then Carl Sargent built on all that for his expansion and further into the Living Greyhawk campaign.
yeah.
Well,
So
yep,
Blake Ryan asked a question about Almor and how it got trashed and how that affects Alyssa. We'll get to that because
yeah,
we haven't really got to the Greyhawk Wars yet.
hmm
We're talking about kind of what leads up to it. We're talking about what we know from the original Gygax published material.
yep,
Now, one thing you got to remember is prior to the publishing of the World of Greyhawk box set and the folio, the Great Kingdom was a made up a kingdom for the Lake Geneva Wargaming Society, and they played in that place. And those maps are a little bit different from what was published. And so there's a history there. So when you talk about the Great Kingdom, you gotta, there's like this evolution of what the Great Kingdom is, and what we see is very different from what Gygax and his wargaming buddies were playing it, and that include Arneson because he was part of that. Blackmoor was part of that thing, and it was much closer to the Great Kingdom than it is on the published maps that we use. So the geography is a little bit different. So then you come to what was published, which Anna and I are talking about, which is in the folio and the box set. And there's a certain amount of information, but he kept it pretty light. He said, here's some basic stuff, and he left a lot of room to breathe. And then when we start getting to the Sargent era, after Gygax has been ejected from TSR, that's when things start to get locked down, and that's when stuff starts to get filled in. And Ivid is one of those documents that really fills in the Great Kingdom, and a lot of what we know about the Great Kingdom flows from that.
yeah. Here's one
And
of these
so,
maps that are shows a little bit of what the Flannies look like. It's been colored afterwards, and it's one of these maps. I'm not really sure. People have given me a couple of different versions of old
yeah, and that actually
stuff.
doesn't show the little counties and provinces
No,
that
it's
breaks it.
very, very, yeah. So but the Great
Right,
King, yes. So this is kind of an interesting precursor to the Darlene map.
right. And you can see the Great Bay is this gigantic
Hmm.
geographical feature that does not exist in our
It's
map.
more kind of, this is more remnant of real North America.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah, it's from the
so
Doomsday Book map, book number 9 map. So yeah. So I'm not really sure.
right.
And here we
And
have,
there's some other maps you can, if you Google, there's some other maps that will actually show you they have political borders within the Great Kingdom.
here's another
You
one.
know, yeah,
Yep. So these are kind of, yeah. So it's kind of a lot of.
that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah, and
Hmm.
this
Yep.
you'll notice there's like little key points with we don't have the key for that
Hmm.
tells us what those little
Yep.
provinces are, but they had lists of leaders and
Yep.
all
Hmm.
and the strengths of the armies and what they were equipped with,
Yep.
and they really fought these battles out in there. And so there was this whole history that they developed from wargaming it out
Hmm.
that is very, very different from what we know today.
Yep.
It became the basis of, but this is something that was separate from what we got.
Hmm.
So kind of coming back to Alyssa. So when we get to the Sargent era, Alyssa is kind of at that point, I think Sargent was the one that said it was a Flan kingdom. I'm almost sure that he's the one that
Well, it
said
was
that.
actually, it's in the original from '83 box set, so it's in this one too.
And it does say that.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm. Yep.
Oh, okay. So then, no,
Yep.
it isn't
It's
Sargent.
from
Okay,
it's
I'm
from
wrong about it.
Gygax himself. Yep. Hmm.
Okay, so that's an original Flan kingdom that was taken over by the RD when they conquered the area,
Yep.
and it then becomes this province within the greater Great Kingdom. And of course, we all know in the early days of the Great Kingdom, they expanded out and they went all the way to the borders of Keoland, in the terms of
Oh yeah, they
Baluna and
was yeah they
Feriandi.
all the way
Yeah,
up in
yeah.
so everything except the northern bit here, the Tilvanot, the barbarians and the nomads and up here. So they basically took and they were up in Peril Land. They were not west of the Falls Gap and the
They were where the Shieldlanders
yeah,
are in
and they
the
didn't
north
take
of the lake.
Keoland, the Sheldamar Valley, if I remember correctly, either.
No, they did not.
Yeah.
That's where they kind of bumped
Hmm.
up against, and they
Yep.
checked the Keelish expansion there.
Yep.
But this was the height of the Great Kingdom when it was this functioning force for good, so
Hmm.
to speak,
Yep.
and then it starts
Yeah.
to fall apart.
Just like
And
Lord Grendelwolf said so well, the Great Kingdom were nice folks, and then they turned mean. Yeah, when the Naelax and Ivid, and he sold his all his sons' souls to the devil or something like that.
I'm not sure what
He
the
made some
say.
sort of pact with something, and things went south from there. I've heard rumors about, but
Yeah,
yeah.
well, in of course Ivid, he was the prince in charge of the North
Yeah,
Province,
and Mordenkainen the bot
and
just shamed me for even the thought of that. So he's kind of awesome. I love that bot. It's so cool. Sometimes he's super appropriate. That's kind of yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, Jason, there's definitely a model for the Holy Roman
Hmm.
Empire,
Yep.
but I would say that that's the late history of the Great Kingdom. The early history of the Great Kingdom is much more Rome,
Yeah. It's
and
kind of
and then
follow the
right,
story of Rome, and it's and United Kingdom of Elissa is in a bit like the Holy Roman Empire. They're now fighting to be the what used to be the old big ones, so to speak. And it's not a
right.
perfect analogy, but it's kind of cool to see that Great Kingdom have shaped Flanese in
So
many
that's
ways, like the Roman Empire shaped Europe.
right, and so that gives you this kind of history before,
Hmm.
and then when we get to the box set, Alyssa is like the primary portion of the South Kingdom, the South Province, excuse me, that still exists,
Yeah.
with a little bit tacked on from the central areas of the Great Kingdom up to the Theli River. So it's Alyssa's probably smaller than Alyssa's boundary didn't go to the Theli because the way it's written in the box set, that was some of the lands that was the Herzog's power base in addition to the fief, and he lost everything else.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, was he stopped at the Theli in terms of his lands, or did they cross the Theli and a little bit around it, and did they curve down to the Megiddia? I
Yeah, now
can
we
never
get
say that.
getting into
Yeah,
things that you have each DM has to kind of decide for their own in their own campaign if they even think it's important. But
absolutely,
yeah, so it's kind of
absolutely.
cool. Yeah, I set the border
Yeah,
in this on this map, and I have to start thinking again for the 576 map. So this is a very interesting because in the 598 map or 596 map that I made that is after the war and all that, then I simply set that the Reldeven and Karlstrand are in the Karlstrand is the capital principality because it's a capital and it's described that there is a capital principality. So of
mm-hmm.
course Karlstrand needs to be in the capital principality, and Reldeven is it's in its own principality. So that meant that the border naturally was the river itself, and everything west of it is belongs to Seldraton and the principality of Elissa. So if that's the historic border, I don't know, but I get the sense that the Karlstrand and Reldeven were probably their own provinces even during South Province times, so to speak. Or
It's probable
yeah.
because you don't really see Kalistrand mentioned in the South
No,
Province.
so he was just, I guess,
Yeah,
one of many provinces in the core kingdom, so to speak, during those days. That's
right.
how I will probably do it when I do my 576 map. These provinces here
Well,
will probably have existed, but they existed in the core kingdom, and then Elissa, the province of Elissa here, will be its own almost semi-domain, so to speak. I'm not really sure how I will do it, but I have to deal with it somehow, and we'll see. Yeah, I might have to have
right.
four. Now I have 3 levels. I might have to have 4 levels. We'll see, or something. But we'll see. Yep.
And your map, you have to make a decision.
Hmm. Yep.
That's always, that's the beauty and the danger of your map, is that
Exactly. It's that. Yep.
there
Hmm.
has to be some choice made. And it may not necessarily be my choice or Jason's choice or Len Grendelwolf's choice, but a choice needs to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what you choose that to be, and I'm not advocating one side or the other. I think you need for your own personal campaign is figure out what works for you. What is the
Yep.
story that you and your players want to tell?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yep.
works in the
Yep.
framework of the adventures that you want to write? Go to it.
Yep.
Don't rely on me and Anna to
No,
give you a
meaning
history.
exactly. It's like
Yeah.
we say things that especially me, that is like my idea, my interpretation of it, so to speak. That's the
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So, but
and
on.
I hope you get inspiration from the both of us and anyone else that's producing content or
Yep.
talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because the reality is like lore is dead and static.
Yeah, and
This is
this
my
is all
conception of
fantasies anyway, because there is no real place.
right,
Meaning, this is all
right.
fantasies that
And
someone
so
came up with, where they was scary in
and
the early days, and then Carl Sargent and
right,
others
or anyone
afterwards.
else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I love history. I was a history major. Don't get me wrong. Lore is a lot of fun, but
Mm-hmm.
it's lonely fun. Now, if I'm
Yeah.
at the table, lore's got to tell a story. Lore has to be engaging. If my players won't engage with it, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter all the
Yeah.
cool stuff I've come up with.
Yeah.
So,
But.
really, look at what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a slave to lore. You know,
But
look
be
at it.
inspired by
Hopefully, it
it, and
inspires you.
yep.
Be inspired by it,
Mm-hmm.
but you sitting around the table with your friends playing D&D or whatever game system you happen to be playing to be in Greyhawk, you gotta come up with that story. Your players and you are going to have interests that are way different from everybody else,
Mm-hmm.
and your style of Greyhawk may be different. Is yours grimdark? Is your whiz bang
Mm-hmm.
cosmic Greyhawk? Is
Yep.
yours planetary romance
Yeah.
Greyhawk that
Is it
goes
high
to be read
magic, low magic
is it
Greyhawk,
low
and
magic?
yep.
Right. That's all a personal decision. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not here to tell you which Greyhawk you should be playing.
Yeah,
I
and,
hope
and
you
also what.
figure that out.
Yeah, and also what rule system or edition of D&D you're running it under will also
Yeah,
affect the flavor a
absolutely.
bit. I think depending on if you run it old school, or if you run even a clone of old school, or you run like
Or you're
me
playing fifth
Pathfinder
edition,
3.5 and
or
or fifth edition now and stuff. So yeah, so that will also, but
yeah,
one
or
thing
even
I.
if you're doing Burning Wheel or Fate, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Yep.
matter. Whatever
Yep.
you're using, tell the story that you want to tell.
Mm-hmm.
Have that experience with those people.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
one of
so
the.
that's me. That's my soapbox. So
Yep, yeah, me too. But one
go
of
ahead.
the coolest thing I think with this region of the Flanny is that it's so damn, I need to use this word because damn, it's so damn full of awesome intrigue, and if you want knights and tournaments and nobility, political intrigue, backstabbing and stuff, this is probably some of the coolest, the best area of the Flannies, almost in any age. Even if you run it 576, you have a whole bunch of this. If you want to have nobility that is fighting it out and not really hostile, but they're enemies, but within one country or at least within one empire, and they striving for power. They're using all methods from politics and trade, cultural influences, parties and diplomacy to assassinations and outright warfare. This is the region for you. When I started reading this for my Alyssa campaign, when I mapped this like 7-8 years ago, I realized, damn, I need to run a campaign here. It's so much cool. So I centered it on Rel Devon. That is the if we go up here, and let me switch the here is my campaign map, so I can just show you a little bit of the area, and because I
You're going to
added
show
the whole.
your actual campaign map that isn't
Yes,
public. Okay.
exactly. Yeah, it's some my patrons have a version of this. It's not too old. That is the same in this area. I've added a few things, so they will get a new. But this is the area that I uh, put it in. This is straight from Illustrator, so it takes a
And
little while to zoom and stuff.
what?
So
So what year was your campaign set? It's
598. Yeah,
598.
yeah.
Okay.
It was 597, 598. So yep. So the next campaign will be about that. That took about a year in playtime. in campaign time. So it will be that we played over 3 years. We played roughly a year in game time in campaign time. So it was centered around the in the province principality of Reldevin, from Reldevin here down in the south, and we played a lot around Bonewood, or that used to be called Thelwood back in the day, on the Thel Plateau, and then we started out in a small little place that I invented up here. That was in the this is the old lands of Almor, and we will get to that very soon, and we can talk about it. So my campaign was actually, this was an old Almor border post, because this, in my taking, this was the borderland between Almor in the west and the Great Kingdom and the Principality of Reldevin in the east here. And then there are some nasty buggers around here in Black Splinter. There is a prince that is a cousin, I think, or of Carven, that runs Reldevin, and he is a vampire necromancer. And this is stuff that comes not from me, but it comes from the Living Greyhawk campaign. So I used the
Right, right.
puppets and the NPCs that were invented. And then you had a paladin, a good guy that runs Goldbolt, that he was assigned to clean up the mess from the Greyhawk Wars in Almor, and from the Duke Zephyrin and all this. But now I think we're getting into something that now we need to talk a little bit about the Greyhawk Wars and how that affected this area. So before I get
So
too deep in here.
Alyssa, aka Poland, um,
That was a good analogy.
yeah,
That's a great
yeah,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Poor
You know,
Alyssa always get into
poor
trouble.
Alyssa is
Yeah.
it's stuck between Nyrund and the
Yeah.
Great Kingdom,
Hmm.
and it was just doomed from the start. They didn't have they couldn't sustain a war by themselves with the Great Kingdom. In having read the Greyhawk Wars box set chronology,
Yeah.
uh, Nairon was busy up in the north because of the fall of Ten, the Duchy of Ten, and they were out of position when the Great Kingdom acted. And so this gets into Austin's raid, where he decided
Hmm.
to go on the offense
Yeah.
and take the fight
He
into the Great
yeah.
Kingdom,
Hmm.
but it didn't save them.
Yeah,
You know,
it was he reminds me of a story of the Swedish king Carl Gustav the XII. He raided the
mhm.
Russians, and he went on, and he eventually succumbed down in the Ukraine, almost on the Turkish almost down in Turkey, and somewhere on in the southeast of the Ukraine, what is today Ukraine. That's where he
Mhm.
succumbed, so to speak, and they had to bring him home. So it's a bit like Austin's raid is very much like that. He raided and was very
Yeah,
successful, and ended up in, I don't know where he succumbed, but somewhere far away from home.
yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of stories. The Greeks coming back from Persia, which actually was the inspiration for the movie The Warriors and the book that it was based upon.
Hmm.
That's a classic Greek tale. Of someone being stuck way behind enemy lines and trying to come home.
Yeah.
Austin. Austin's raid was a little more direct than those stories. He had a strategic purpose in trying to draw the Great Kingdom away from the border of Alyssa and
Yeah.
attacking them.
Hmm.
But that upset the apple cart, and that change. This is why the Holy Censor was executed, because he basically laid down with when Austin attacked. He weakened the army of the Gloriols that was putting pressure on Alyssa at the time, and that started the southern provinces break down, because they weren't too jazzed about being in the fight in the first place, and then Austin broke the back. The only thing that happened was he tried to siege one of the cities along the Theli River, and was the leader there was not a dummy, and they couldn't take the town, the city, I should
Yeah.
say. And they then at that point they were in trouble.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of stuff going on in this region, post Greyhawk Wars, and
Yeah.
that's where Sergeant comes in. And so, like, if you want to run intrigue, it's an amazing, amazing place. There's
Hmm.
so many princes.
Yep.
Now, if you don't like the animuses, you can always turn those into just very powerful humans.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's remember, take inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One of my complaints about Sargent's writing is that you had to be this tall to adventure in some of his places, especially in the lands of Iuz, because of
Mm-hmm.
all the demons running around, and
Yep.
in this case, in the Great Kingdom, all the devils running around, because that's the deal that was made with the Malachite throne,
Yep.
the fiend scene throne. You
Mm-hmm.
know, basically, it was also a gate to the first layer of hell,
Okay.
which
Mm-hmm.
should you know, there's an upcoming adventure coming out that's set in Baldur's Gate that's going to go
Oh.
it's going straight to the first layer of hell.
Ah, that
So
sounds like a very good
so
analogy for what happened in
yeah,
Rossi's
so
and mhm.
if you're playing fifth edition and you want to do that kind of stuff, there's probably going to be a lot of stuff to steal from that book that you could use here in the Great Kingdom.
Mhm. Yep.
And you could certainly repurpose it and not people are like saying, well, where's Baldur's Gate? Just toss Baldur's Gate out, go to Roxas.
Mhm.
If you're going to set it
Yep.
at 576, perfect.
Yep.
If you're going to set it post Greyhawk's work, even better.
Mhm.
It's crazy town over there.
Oh yeah,
um
because it kind of fell apart. And let's go back to the map a bit. And I'm going to
to the
substitute with
map,
my
yeah.
campaign map because it's more stuff on it. So if we go up to Rossi's, that used to be the capital of the Great Kingdom, is now I've actually smeared it with black because after the war it kind of turned into this kind of enormous mess of all sorts of magical fiend induced kind of mayhem, so to speak. So God knows, and it became this power struggle between Naelax, his chief wizard Karulk, I think it was his name, and Duke Sephrin, that was
Yeah.
one of his highest commanders, and God knows, or the gods knows who else, so to speak, that kind of fought it over and the whole city just disappeared into this magic kind of induced mayhem, so to speak. So yeah,
Well,
that.
there's hints that the companion guard, that which
Mm-hmm.
is essentially the Emperor's guard
Yeah.
in what or actually devils
Yeah.
in
And
armor,
mm-hmm.
and
And yeah,
yeah, or at least some of them were,
yeah,
and
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 Blake.
there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, Blake Ryan has a very good question. So where's the capital now then? So after when this fell apart, then the Great Kingdom, even the core kingdom, fell apart, and it basically became two independent kingdoms that fighting over the right to call themselves the inheritor of great kingdoms. So the southern part, the southern province, and the southern bit, basically south of Rossi's of the core lands, became the United Kingdom of Alyssa. And this is described in the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer. There you can read
Right.
about these things.
And
And the northern bit, north of the capital, became the north, the Great Kingdom of Northern Noerdi, or the North Kingdom. So under Duke Grinnell. So the capital of the North Kingdom became uh, Eastfair here, one of the metropolises,
yeah,
probably the biggest city in what used to be the core, so to speak, and it was that was the capital of the North Province, I think, before during the Greyhawk, the Great Kingdom era. So that was the capital of the North Province, then became the capital of the North Kingdom when they simply struck out, and they brought in most of the principalities. But then there are around Rossi's, it's kind of more fluent, so to speak, and so the lands around Rossi's are these are contested, but most of them in my campaign, I settled that most of the United Kingdom turned out to be the strongest part. They had a better economy and they had a bit more mass of simply demographics were in their favor, so to speak. They had more big cities, the lands were probably a bit more fertile and better organized. So they came out on top. So the lands, so they claimed most of the lands. So the lands just around Rossi's, no one claimed, no one even dare to go there. So the most of the lands around here became the marshland of Rossi's, which means that Karlstrand, and let's go down here. That's the capital of the United Kingdom of Elissa. It's down here. It used to be
Right.
just one of the big cities, and that settled. So the House of Darmans, very silicious, business oriented, they took command of the United Kingdom.
Merchants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
merchant. They took command of it, and so they probably got the economy going a little bit faster than North Kingdom. So the marshland of Rossi's simply, and this is from not my invention. This is the Living Greyhawk campaign. So they divided up the borderlands here are a number of marshlands, meaning they are run by some military or some guy that simply runs it in order to protect it from enemy incursions and apply martial law and stuff like that. So it's kind of run as a not as a normal where people live
So
normally
if
that
I
much.
can break in on this a little
Yeah,
bit. So
please.
in Ivid, there's really three power centers. East Fair up in the north, like
Yep.
Anna's saying,
Mm-hmm.
Kalistrand down in the south.
Yep.
Things are a little more fluid in Ivid. They become a little more stable in the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer. But in Roxas, Ivid's still alive. He's undying,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so he still believes he's in charge, and he'll send out commands to people that don't exist anymore, and he still
Yep.
thinks he actually has a viable army.
Mm-hmm.
That, but no one is really strong enough to take him out yet. And so the symbology of taking Roxas and having the throne is super important to claiming that you are the Overking. Now, both the North and the South are claiming that. The South probably has more power,
Mm-hmm.
but the reality is no one has enough power to dislodge the mad Overking,
Yep.
and you still have to avoid his assassins because he could still take you out. So there's things are not, there are power bases, but things aren't super stable.
Yep.
And so there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of flux
Yep.
going on
Mm-hmm.
around these
Yep.
areas.
Yep.
You're probably the most stable is the southern province, and the greater kingdom
Yeah,
of
the further
Alyssa.
you get away from Rossi's, the more stable it becomes. So in Spine and down in the southwest and probably more kind of stable than the central lands have now.
But you still have to deal with the Scarlet Brotherhood, who
Oh
still
yeah.
have,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
yeah, and they still control certain parts, like
I-
they still
I-
control On Wall, and
yeah. I
they're
guess
still,
yeah.
yeah.
The coast here probably seem to have done fairly well, Relastra and Unsi, and they formed what they call the Solnor Compact. So they kind of broke away from the lands
But
and
they're not really trying to claim the Overkingship. They're just trying to survive.
exactly. So they just
Right? Yeah.
detach themselves from the mayhem and then just try to continue life as they used to, so to speak. But there's also a few in between. So we have the Principality of Dustbridge that try to stay neutral. So they simply try to kind of say that okay, they're a bit like Sweden or Austria during World War II or something like that. They just try to uh, according to
Switzerland,
yeah, yeah.
Switzerland, not Austria.
Well, Austria was trying afterward, but Austria got invaded. Yeah, but Switzerland and Sweden
Yeah,
during World War II, they just tried to. But
yeah,
Switzerland was different because they were kind of enclosed by one side. But that's a real story. But then they have the former lands of. I
yeah.
just call them the former lands because they don't seem to have a description, and they're kind of left over no big cities. So that's one area here. And then there's the up here. But we have a good question from Brian again. What happened to Adri and the elves? And they are not much mentioned in the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer and stuff. They're barely mentioned. That there are a few.
There is
There is
the
one is called Bitterness. That's an interesting place, and that's some leftover from Elven times that have gone into some deep freeze. And there are two of these kind of places that radiate cold and freeze everything. One is Bitterness here, and the other one is down here, one that is called Cold Spire or something. We'll see. There is a lighthouse here up here on the go in here.
Oh yeah, I remember
Ice
that Living
Spire.
Greyhawk
Yeah,
adventure.
yeah, Ice
Yeah,
Spire.
I
Yeah.
remember that adventure. It was a
Mm-hmm.
nightmare.
Yep. So these two are
I played in that adventure.
okay, cool. So yep. So as usual, I never played any adventures. I just read them and tried to get them in on my map. But that is basically it's what used to be, I think, a key elven realm back in the day, as basically just been the only description I remember from the Living Greyhawk campaign is the bitterness and the cold wood here that is kind of a
Yeah,
leftover elven place that is now dangerous and you will freeze to
but that's
ice
like
just going there.
that's like old. That's old history there.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the elves and the relationship to the Great Kingdom, they were always under threat. Now,
Yeah.
the Army Forest was not directly controlled by the Great Kingdom.
No, and
There
that's
was a
what
common.
exactly. There's like a
Yeah.
large central area here where and I should actually make it much bigger than this. I realized that I should
Mhm.
probably only say that they basically only try to do an incursion maybe a few miles in or 10 or 20 miles, not all the way in. So I need to
Right.
redraw the
So
borders
essentially,
here.
the wood. Yeah. The right. The wood folk and the elves kept the Great Kingdom's armies out for the
Mm-hmm.
most part.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be like the equivalent of the Romans marching a legion through the forest of Germany, and then it just disappears.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and the Arder
you
is
know,
so
and
big that
so
it's like what is it, 500 miles across or something, and back in the day it was
yeah,
even
it's
bigger. Yeah,
gigantic.
yeah.
Yeah, and so the other elven enclaves are Sundi. The Gray
Yes,
Elves are
that's
kind of the
what I
big
think
players
most
there,
of
and then
the
there's Sylvan
elves,
Elves.
yeah, elves that
Well,
lived
no,
up
there's
here.
elves in a lot of the yeah. So in Sundi, you have the Gray Elves kind of in the urban areas, and then the Ruwood is Sylvan Elves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at least as far as the original box set was concerned,
Yeah.
if you look at the encounter tables, you can kind of see where the populations are. And then the forests that were around Rel Astra, the Central Great Kingdom,
Oh yeah, you have
what's
the
the name of that one again?
Grandwood, the Grandwood
That is
Forest.
also elves, and they're under
Mm-hmm.
threat.
Yep.
They have bad blood with the Great Kingdom. They don't
Mm-hmm.
trust a lot of people. At least they shouldn't, because they've gotten the short end of the stick when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to the history of the Great Kingdom. Um, and so uh, if there's elves working with the Great Kingdom, they're kind of outliers. Most of them, most of the elves are not super friendly to the Kingdom of Artie, especially when it went bad.
Yep.
So there are plenty of elves. It's just that they aren't really super detailed. You got to remember in Greyhawk, this they said humans are in ascendancies, and the gazetteer and the guy that were in the box set were from a very human point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
for instance, in the Gloriel Mountains, there's 10,000 mountain dwarves, and they've held off the Great Kingdom for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And they were constantly under threat. They're some of the most battle-hardened troops in that region, for that specifically because of that, and they still hold their position. And so if you kind of want to talk about demi-humans, you're going to have to suss it out by reading the geographical information that was presented, and then some of the stuff in Ibid where you can suss out what Sargent. But again, Sargent was very much about the human interaction and not really paying attention to the demi-humans.
Yep.
That's really going to become
Yep.
something that you as a PM and your players are going to have to figure out what you want in your campaign.
Mm-hmm. And Lord Grindelwolf has a good point. Elves have long memories.
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there are not so much dwarfs inside, but there around South Province and Elissa. Now we can go back to the where we started, so to speak. So hang on a second. I need to put my mouse over on the right here. So here we go. So we have
We were
down
going
here.
to talk about Elissa, but now we're just doing the Great Kingdom, which is
Yes,
awesome.
yeah, but we have next door to Elissa that used to be the kingdom of Elissa and then became the South Province and then the Principality of Elissa. We have the something that is not detailed in Gygax's original writings, but it's mentioned. It's the Iron Hills that was then detailed to become a kingdom of Iron Hills and a kingdom of dwarfs in the Living Greyhawk campaign. I'm not sure if it's actually mentioned as a kingdom, but I think the Iron Hills are mentioned in
No,
the. Yeah, let's
the
me.
Iron Hills.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
going to read in
the
here. So yeah,
yeah.
so
Go
go
on.
on and
So
and
are you
and
reading the? Are you reading the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer?
no, I'm
Or
reading in this. So yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to just see here if we have any minor ones. So we have.
So yeah, the major demi-human activity that's been outlined, in the popular stuff has been basically around the Iron League, because you have Iron Gate, you have Onwall, you have
Yeah.
the ID and Sundi, and these are all humans and demi-humans working together, because if they don't, they die. And so they're a little more detailed. You don't get much detail about the demi-humans. You can infer things in the original books from the encounter tables, because if you want to learn about a lot of the demi-human populations that are not really specifically listed, you have to
Mm-hmm.
go look at the encounter tables for those geographic areas. You know, and that's one of the things that it's confusing, because information is spread out in different areas, and you have to infer a lot of it. Now, Living Greyhawk filled that out, because there's all these people who are saying, well, what about this? What about that? And they started writing their fan stuff, and then some of those fans wrote the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer, and so
Mm-hmm.
their theories got published.
Yeah.
And some of that is based on the second edition material done by Roger Moore and Anne Brown and Sean K. Reynolds, and then and of course, excuse me, and of course Carl Sargent. Uh, but then you had people like Gary Holland, and you have Eric Mona, uh, Paul Luby. I mean, there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole host of people, Crichton Brighthurst. All these people were either publishing stuff that, Sean K. Reynolds wrote the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer along with all these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then you saw all this stuff being published online. Unfortunately, because of all the rights issues, we really don't have a comprehensive story that we can or lore that we can bring and say, here's what Living Greyhawk did. It's all kind of spread all over the place.
Yeah. But it's
You
kind
can
of
access
fun.
it better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's kind
there's
of
some
both
you
an
can
asset.
access pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah, and it's both an
Yeah,
asset and a problem. It's a problem if you want to clear cut saying
right.
this is what you're supposed to do. But on the other hand, if you're very open minded, you can just pick and is cherry pick the pieces you like and just go with it, run with it. And one of the
And one of the beauties of your map is because you use a lot of the locations and the names in them
mm-hmm,
from Living Greyhawk,
yep,
even if you do not have the direct information the Living Greyhawk campaign came up with, you have the place names, you
yeah, you
have
could just run
locations,
with them and put in your own
fill
content.
them,
So yep,
yeah, fill them in,
mm-hmm,
you know?
yep, and that's what
Yeah,
I did
exactly.
with
Except for
the
BK. Yeah,
yeah, what I did
exactly.
with Kingdom of Iron Hills, it was mentioned as the Kingdom of Iron Hills, and so what I did, I created the large
Right.
town of Bronzegate, and that's and the dwarves had roads in here, and I'm planning to detail this more, but I haven't done that yet, so I'm kind of taking.
Is this on your own map, or are we on the
It's my
public
own
map?
map, so yep. Hmm.
Okay.
This is my own map
Okay.
with more stuff, so to speak, way more stuff than the. Hang on a second, we can look at and see what it looks like on the. Well, it's almost the same. So actually, I haven't detailed. This is what I did on. So the public map has as the same here. It's just up in the around Rel Devon and stuff. That's where I have tons and tons and tons of more stuff. So we can just take a quick look at my map if I move up to up here. It's starting to be more detailed, but here is if we go around Rel Devon and move upwards, I can show you a little bit of the kind of detail that I think should be on every area should have this much. So there are like towns and villages and little keeps and small camps and
Mm-hmm.
there's a little village probably every 15 miles or so there's a village, and there's some wood elves that used to
In
live
the
in the Thelwood that are now having a little desperate camp here on the edge trying to look at things. And I put in local areas, so this is the barony of Selaville, and this is the barony of Merrick that was actually created in my campaign because someone got the mission of trying to clear out things and see if they could defend this druid site that was in there. And then when they started getting into the problem with this abyssal kind of weird evil tree ant that runs around and causing the bonewood, not my invention, another living greyhawk stuff that I thought was kind of cool. And then we have the
Hmm.
Temple of Lohan, which is an interesting location that is also from. I placed it here because it's only written about but it's tied to the stories of the Death Knights, and it's somewhere in
Mm.
this area. So I simply placed it here. Temple of Lohan is where the uh, the original sins that led to the Death Knights come from there. So it's an old shrine that it's kind of now just a ruin, but that's where the Death Knights were kind of coming into. And then you have the Protectorate of Assel Hills, and this is old country that kind of was devastated in the war with where the Almorians and Osum, and then the oh, hang on a second. General, hang on a second. Sephrin, Duke Sephrin, he raided this area heavily. So then it became the protectorate afterwards. When they started to clear it up, it became the protectorate of Assel Hills, and I named these hills um, Assel Hills, these hills that are here. And then I named a small river that is not detailed, but it kind of should be here. So it's a river that comes out, starts up here in the East Fence, and then goes here past Rasfern, and then you have the Splinter Marsh, and near Black Splinter, and so I named them the Splinter March. Splinter March is this is kind of how I do when I do maps in my campaign. Black Splinter is a name of that came up in the Living Greyhawk campaign, and so I simply took Splinter March. That's marsh what they called, and then the river flows here, and then it flows out that way. And then I invented the Fang. It's an inn run by an hag, and she has a hag. Her name is Ishma, and she lives there simply because she's one of the caretakers of the surroundings. That Black Splinter, the prince, he kind of Ferdinand, he kind of likes to have various weird, nasty creatures out there that helps him defend his property. So Ishma is one of the in Night Hag, and she has a whole hag coven, and she kind of clears out. And they what they live on is that they actually run an economy. They run a store selling components for potions and spells and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So you can actually go there, and some smart in a little village called Hinas, there is a bunch of goblins and humanoids that actually realize that, oh, people who want to come and visit the Fang, they need guidance through here. So they actually guiding customers there, and you have to be a damn brave customer to go there. But if you have money and you want to buy, and they will actually protect you. But if they don't like you, and for some reason you try to screw them, then they, yeah. So they're kind of the evil guides that, so they maintain a little bit of an economy. So that's what happens when you have a failed state kind of thing in the fantasy world.
Right. And,
Yeah.
and this is all stuff that you came up with
Yeah,
based
I
on,
took the Living
yeah,
Greyhawk thing, and then took all the things that were there and just spun it one more time, so to speak, and added a little bit extra on top, the topping of what was already there.
right, because you had an idea of what a failed
Hmm.
state would be like and
Yeah.
who could
Hmm.
be playing at the margins of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So, yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and this is exactly what we're hoping you'll be inspired to do is like you
Yep.
don't have to have like when I take notes, I do a bare outline because I want my players to have an impact on what's going on. Like I'll have some ideas about where
Hmm.
I want to go.
Yep.
I'll have some ideas like, I was talking with Anna last night when we were kind of discussing what we're going to talk on the show, and this is nothing to do with what we're doing here, but one of my tangents was talking about the Moon Selene and what
Hmm.
the Spelljammer campaign talked about that. And I had this idea, but it's just a rough idea, is that the elves were originally on Selene and they had their first major war post the breakup of the Drow and the other elves on that moon, and they made it uninhabitable. And then they came to Oerth. And that's all I've done with that idea. It's just an idea that I
Hmm.
have, and it
Yep.
gives me something to kind of build around. And if that interests my players, I might develop that some more. But I'm not going to take it much further than that.
Yeah.
I'll just keep it in the back of my mind. And if it
Hmm.
becomes important, it becomes important. It's just an idea.
Yeah, and
Don't.
you did what I didn't do yet, so to speak. When I heard it, was like awesome. That was something I could have went go in that direction because I had some ideas that the elves seems to be so tied into Selene and stuff. So
Hmm.
but I didn't dare to go that far in my thoughts. But it was awesome. So when I heard it was like, yes, that's so cool.
And again,
Exactly,
that could
Lord
be,
Grindelwolf. You
yeah,
touched on it. There's a kingdom with the name Selene, and that's I bet that's where Brian got the idea from.
and that's some of what yes, there is a kingdom called Selene, and so you can tie this into Shanae Moonbow in terms of what happens when they take over the Lindar Isles. Where are they
Yep,
going,
and
right?
we
You
can
know,
look at the
and why is the moon the symbol, and what is it that they're trying to do?
yep.
And so again, it's an idea. I haven't fleshed that out. I'm probably not going to, because unless it's going to have something I'm going to do, I'm not going to flesh that out unless I'm going to use it.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
present you that idea, and if you want to flesh it out and you're going to use it, go
Yep.
to it.
Mhm.
I think that would be great.
Mhm.
um it's a matter of what is it you're trying to do, and don't get bogged down in trying to get every single detail filled in. You got to give yourself some room to breathe, even with
Yep.
the Great Kingdom, which has
Mhm.
a
Yep.
ton of information.
Yep.
Is leave it a little loose so that you have a little room to play, because your players are going to give you some ideas, and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, where am I going to put that?
Yeah.
I've already
And it
mapped all this out.
Yeah, and it's also up to what the players are interested in. I I should
Right.
have listened more because some of my players probably didn't like that campaign much because it was so much bogged down in all this story and all these things.
Hmm.
So it was not much railroading because I just let my players loose, and then after a while, where should we go? What should we do? And there were death knights coming from nowhere, and they were like, damn, and we need to fight them. And he's like, no, 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 you're only 5th level, you shouldn't fight them. And so there was, yeah, there was a whole debacle around that. So it was, in many examples, it was a super, super cool campaign with lots of M's and really tied into Greyhawk. But in some players' mind, it was probably a terrible campaign, not level appropriate, and no adventure path to go on and stuff. So it's so you need
But you
to
were doing sandbox. You were
exactly. I'm
doing
doing
sand,
sandbox, and
and
some of the players
in
were
in the sand,
yeah. They were that
they
they
didn't.
never played in any of that. They were used to Pathfinder's
Yeah.
adventure paths from Paizo, and that was the and mine were completely the
Or
opposite.
right, because you had encounters that weren't tiered to
Exactly, everything
be.
was there. If there's
Yeah.
a Death Knight, that Death Knight is there, period, so to speak. So yep. So they have
Right.
to
But
navigate the
but
world
here's
is yeah.
but
Go on.
right. But here's a little piece: is that unless the players have done the absolute stupidest thing possible, you should have a plan for your villains. Is like, not all villains are going to kill your players outright.
Exactly. They didn't. This
Right.
Death Knight just tried to get through the village that the characters happened to be in, and I gave them plenty of warning. They saw all the ominous signs and the
Yeah.
dead birds falling down and the whole
Yeah.
shebang, so to speak. It was like the
They didn't
the
catch a clue.
Nazguls coming
Yeah.
through. And but they were dead certain to lure a trap, set a trap, and get a rope across the road, and then when he came, he rolled, and his nightmare kind of stumbled over it, and he fell, and the but then he got up again, and then they were hiding and then they ran up and tried to beat him senseless and kill
So how
him.
many
And
died?
well, all except one. So when he killed one first, simply punched one to death, and then took out his sword and or mace or whatever he had, and was kind of looking around. Then they all came up and were yelling, and he was like, "No, I don't want to deal with all these individually." So just used an Eldritch Blast, and all of them except one that was running away died, and it was a TPK. So yeah, so tell about it, and
Yeah.
then he went up on his nightmare and rode off again into the night, and my
Right.
players stared at me like, what the hell was that, kind of, yeah. So that was something that,
Well, and
yeah.
see, that's when evil DM Brian
hmm
has some
yeah.
being of power whisper in some dead
hmm
person's ear.
Yep.
Do you want to come back?
Yeah, I've been even at this year's PaizoCon. There was rumors about me TPKing every party, and I think that incident is because there were two players of mine in that from that campaign that was at the convention, and I think they spread the rumor that I'm killing every party with things that were CR 12 or 15 or something, and they were like 5th level. So yeah.
Well, the thing is like, just don't get me wrong. I don't throw people in a sandbox and say and like surprise them. I let them know,
Yeah,
hey, there's gonna, I'm gonna give you fair warning.
yeah,
I'll step back in meta game a little bit with my players and say, hey, some places are gonna be really dangerous,
yeah,
and I will give you fair warning if you pick up on the signs of it. But you can walk into a place that you really shouldn't be,
yeah.
or you need to tread
Hmm.
lightly and negotiate, because not
Yep.
everything is going to be
But
level appropriate.
yep.
And and I'll say the Great Kingdom, as it's written by Sargent, is very much, unless you're playing a high level campaign, is it's not level appropriate. Your
No,
characters
and
are
I
going to have
did,
to,
yeah. But I
yeah,
love those
you're
stories. Even the Undying and Living Greyhawk Gazetteer and stuff. I just love those books. They are some of the
right.
best ever
but
written for Greyhawk.
even the base outline that was given in the Gazetteer is the Great Kingdom. You're not going to go in and go beat up the Overking, in your
Nope.
storyline.
Well,
There's
you never
just,
know. Yeah.
it's just too big. It's just too big
Yeah. Yeah. Most
for you
characters.
to,
Hmm.
yeah. Unless you're above 10th level,
Hmm.
and more likely like 15th level or above, you're just not going to have that much of an impact on the massive scale
Yep.
that is the Great Kingdom.
Hmm. Yep.
And so the players have to be a little creative about how they want to do that. If they're going to be murder hobos, well,
The sandbox is not
good,
where you want to be a murder hobo.
yeah,
Really, you have to. Yeah.
good luck.
Yeah. Hmm. But
If you're trying, if you want to be someone who's working at the edges of things, and whether you're for weal or woe in that scenario, there's plenty of things you can do. You can find Patreons.
yeah.
There are little things you can do to work at the edges of it, and you just have to be aware of your environment and know when not to step hard and when to tread lightly.
Hmm.
And I think that is, I do think that at least in earlier editions of D&D, when you started slapping devils and demon down to your land, whether it was in the lands of Ayuz or in the Great Kingdom, you had to be this tall to venture there, and that kind of sucked.
Yeah. And I
But
also
there
think
are
that.
ways that
Mhm.
there is ways to mitigate that,
Yeah.
so that that you can adventure there and it doesn't feel like you're constantly on the run.
Yep.
But
And
at the same time, if you mouth off to a greater devil, expect bad things to happen to you.
hmm But it's also interesting. I think it also has a little bit how that developed with the evolution of D&D itself as a rule system. Because in the early editions,
Mhm.
these were exceptions. They were like dragons, and they would computing nerds would today, or computer gamers will call a boss monster. That was one thing that came at the end of the campaign or at the bottom of the dungeon, or something like that.
Mhm.
Somehow, and even they weren't that beefy. But then with third edition, all of a sudden the things went up the charts, and you get monsters that way the scale between the lowest and the highest monster all of a sudden became much wider in terms of hit points and power levels and all that. It spread up and down much further, I think. And you also have an
I also think
invasion of stuff. There was like, yeah.
I also think that the way that Gygax envisioned, at least in first edition D&D, was that when you hit ninth level or 10th level, you were going to build something, get retainers,
Yes, then you were
and
part of the political
you
power struggle and playing in the wars and stuff
right,
like that, rather than
and
go
you were going to
adventuring
be,
individually.
yeah, you would go out on special missions,
Hmm.
and then you'd have a lower level character that went out and did the regular adventure stuff,
Yep.
and you would do special missions into some special dungeons, but you were going to be more about defending your territory and working in the political
Hmm.
realms of
Yep.
this thing. And that kind of, you know that kind of that was something that didn't really translate in Living Greyhawk, because we all started at first level when we started playing that campaign in 2000, and it was, there really wasn't a mechanism in a big, you know worldwide campaign to have people actually having, a stronghold
Yeah.
and doing that kind of venturing. So we had all of these, I think you
Was it
retired at what,
level
15th
kept?
level?
Yeah, I
something like
was going
that.
to say, was it level capped at
You,
15?
you,
Then you retired at.
you yeah. Well, you could do. There were certain high level adventures you could do, but yeah, at
Hmm.
15th level, you're pretty much level
Yep.
capped in terms of what you could do, unless you were in a special adventure. But they didn't really have anything where you could affect like the politics of the place because there was just too many people, and it would be the triads didn't have enough time to do the political stuff with you
Yeah.
individually like that.
Yeah.
And so, that's something that's going to happen in a home campaign.
Hmm.
I mean, look at, for example, if you look at what goes on in Lord Gazumba's channel, that campaign's been running for 39 years, and there are multiple adventuring groups that they all play, and some of them are high level and they hold lands. And that's
Yep.
kind of more of what the Gygaxian model was. That is not really what third edition up really models
Yep.
in terms of how it does. That
Hmm.
there are third-party products now that allow you to do that. You can get Matt Colville's
Yes.
strongholds and followers, and
Exactly,
he's
and
going to
now
do
we
a
have one thing that
yeah.
kickstarted from Legends and Lore, Legendary Games, the Ultimate Kingdoms, and that is actually kickstarting
Mm-hmm.
right now, and I'm really interested. I'm going
And
to
isn't there a
jump on.
fifth? Isn't there's a fifth edition Kingmaker from Paizo as well?
Yeah, that also
Um,
Legendary Games are part of, and Ultimate Kingdoms
oh,
comes
that's
in.
Legendary Games.
Yeah, so now I'm doing a little bit of a
Yeah,
stump here, and I'm not a shareholder, or I'm not earning anything. I'm not doing anything for Legendary
nor am
Games
I.
as of, so I don't have no economic interest in this, but I'm going to pledge to that Kickstarter because it seems to be irresistible for my style of gaming. So I have some of their earlier products and I love them. So I'm going to pledge to that one. It's 5e and Pathfinder. So I think if you want to run a sandbox campaign with something like the Great Kingdom and the Alyssa and that area, then that type of gameplay I think suits if there's any place in anywhere in the Flan East that that type of gameplay is really well suited. It's the former area of the Great Kingdom and the core lands and the South Province and stuff. That's awesome. But now
And
we
my
have.
advice to
Sorry.
players, so my advice to players, if you decide to go do you and your DM decide to do a campaign in the Great Kingdom, is you need to investigate who the players are and learn who to play off each other,
Yep.
because you don't want the full weight of some of these super powerful people. Like, you don't want an animus or a vampire lord coming down upon your head. You want those guys fighting each other, and you
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to figure
Yep.
out how to leverage that. You're going to have to do deals.
Yep.
It's not going to be a straight up heroic campaign where don't play lawful stupid. Okay, when you do that,
Yep.
it's so bad.
Yep.
If you're going to play the stereotypical paladin where I can't do it, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, but
You're
the
going to get
way the
pummeled.
yeah, the way I deal with sandboxes like that. But before I'm going into that, I have to say welcome to Critical Misfit, and thank you so much for pledging to my supporting my patron. And you also tweeted about me today, so it's awesome. You made my day, so it's awesome. Welcome so much to come to Legends and Lore show. This is awesome. Thank you. But anyway, the way I treat that problem in a sandbox is to make sure that the sandbox is a target rich environment. And I'm not meaning only a target rich environment for the player characters, but also for the high ups. Meaning, if there's
Mm-hmm.
thousands, there might be hundreds of others, low level aspiring paladins and good line warriors that they might fight, so to speak. So it's not automatic that just because the characters come in an area that the highest high up ones get their attention and kind of start hunting you. So that way it's not you against the world, it's you just a little part of the world. So it will be when you're low level, you normally don't pick a fight with the biggest baddest ones. You kind of fly under their radar if you're smart. And so meaning, so when the Death Knight rides through the village, you stay in the inn and you don't go out and pick a fight with him. And that's usually how, because the Death Knight, he might be interested in killing everyone in the village, and then you have to run and try and flee, but and hope that he will be enough occupied murdering all the other villagers, so to speak. So sometimes but if you're the murdering hobo type of player who simply thinks that everything there is there for you to kill, then you have a problem in my type of sandboxy campaigns. Yes.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
so I'm going to proselytize a few things. Again, I have no financial interest in this, There is a uh, it's kind of a combination of D&D retro clone slash Traveler retro clone that's combined together for science
Oh.
fiction called Stars Without Number.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that they have in there, and it's its own little subsystem that you can pull out and change, is they have a faction system for the DM that So for every month to play, you run a faction turn,
Mm-hmm.
and all the factions you've set up have different resources and power levels, and you just play it out. And what that does is gives you a surprise as the game master
Mm-hmm. That's what,
on
yeah.
of what can happen,
Mm-hmm.
because when those NPCs go at it. Now, you as your players can go and mess that stuff up directly. If they do something, that happens no matter what.
Yep.
But these big forces that are going around aren't static, and it
Yep.
gives you,
Yep.
and then you have rumors and news come out of that.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece that you kind of need to look at when you're doing something in the Great Kingdom like this is like the strongholds and followers things, but also, you know, I lost my train of thought here. There was another piece I was going to say. I'll come back to it.
Yeah, but I would say you said
Yeah.
something that I think is really important because it depends on what style of DM you are. Some DMs want to write a
Mm-hmm.
story and then play out the story. They kind of homemade adventure path, and that is perfect. And me
Mm-hmm.
as a player love that type of campaign. I have no problem with it. I just love it. So when DMs write a story and they go from scene to scene, and you're supposed to kind of work your way through that story. That's one way of doing it. When I'm running my own games, I run the complete opposite. I just like you said, I as a DM, I want to be surprised, meaning I don't know what's going to happen. So I roll dice and
Mm-hmm.
use tables, and I simply come up with, like, there might be a natural disaster happening, or I simply roll and see
Mm-hmm.
if the king is in a good mood or a bad mood. If he's in a bad mood, if something bad happens, he's going to hammer down like crazy at it. If he's a good mood, he will be like, oh, so be it. And all sorts of, I roll like every day things are happening. If there's like, what's the economy like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the weather like, and stuff like that on a daily and a weekly basis. The players never see that, but it's so
Right.
I can be surprised because I want to know and see what happens. I don't want to dictate what happens. Sometimes I do because I want to
And you're trying
insert.
to
Yeah.
sublimate.
Oh, go on.
Yeah. You're trying to sublimate some of your own biases,
Mm-hmm.
like about how you want the story to go.
Yep.
And it's good when you can be surprised by something, because it'll take you in a different direction. It might surprise your players because
Yep.
they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so and so is going to do this, and then
Yep.
something happens
Yep.
because of a random roll,
Yep.
and you're like, and then you figure out a way to justify that.
Yep.
you know that starts making you creative, and
Mm-hmm.
it can get you out of ruts, so that
Yep.
it doesn't isn't the same old thing. I'll say this: Dungeon World and a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games have a thing called fronts. I know there are several blogging DMs out there that have talked about this. I know even Mike Merles is super excited about that concept. That's another way that you can kind of foreshadow things for your players, and things are happening whether they choose to engage with them or not. And so the world kind of comes alive, and you can sort of be surprised
Yep.
by it.
Yep. And
And and it gives you something to do beyond just responding to the players, and it makes the world seem like it's lived in.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I
And
and again, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say the Scott Kynan has he runs the adventures differently than I do, but he has a very good point that surprise comes when the players mess up your plans. And I think that one of the main reasons I want to run a sandbox is that I don't want to face that dilemma. I don't want to do a lot of preparations and then feel like it's going up in smoke because the players go off the rails or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's simply full of stuff, and I have to. I'm basically playing all the other ones while they're playing their characters, and they are playing their characters and react to everything that happens, and I simply step from one NPC to the other and try to figure out what they would do in a certain situation, and just playing them for a moment. And then when focus goes somewhere else, then I just focus. Okay, what is this barkeep doing? What is this merchant doing? What is this guard doing? And whatever. So I just try to play them without. I
Mhm.
just try to figure from their head what they know of the world and stuff. And then I introduce rumors and all sorts of stuff and true and false and happenings, and just try to figure out from the horizon of this creature, what does this creature do, and then play with it, and all these things. So it's a give and take between the players and me. So that's how I
Yeah.
try to. But it's simply a play style that works for me when I'm running my games. So yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I can see why you really like the Great Kingdom,
mm-hmm. Yep. It was a
as a place of
perfect
adventure.
area for
And
this. Yep. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I'll say this is that, yeah, your players will surprise you. They'll always choose to do something that you haven't thought of
Mm-hmm. Yep.
usually,
Yep.
or or God, you give them a freaking puzzle and it's like the easiest thing you think in the universe, and
And
they're
they
like,
take forever, or something I worked a
or they go, this
week
is
on
beyond
to
science. I
figure.
have no idea. Yeah.
Exactly, and sometimes you
Yeah.
work on a puzzle for a week, and they think in 30 seconds, and some smart brain in the party or the players have just figured out in seconds, and that went up in smoke. So
Right.
yeah, so I puzzles is something I'm
Yeah.
very scared of doing myself, because I'm not particularly smart when it comes to stuff like that. I'm not a code breaker or anything like that. I worked with a lot of people that had
And
smarts like that, but not me.
yeah, and it's one of those things you have to practice because it's not in
Mm-hmm.
my skill set to do. Kind
Yep.
of a murder mystery is a really hard thing for me to do.
Yep.
One other piece of DM advice I will say is that, yeah, your players are going to throw you curveballs, but one of the things you have to do is don't get into the omnipotent viewpoint, because you as the DM know a lot of information your players don't.
Yeah.
You have a lot of hidden information,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things you have to do is when you have an NPC that is seeing what they're doing, is a witness to it that isn't already dead, you have to say, okay, what does this person know?
Yeah.
What is this person's point of view?
Mm-hmm.
And how are they going to react to this on what they know? Not what I know about the larger meta pieces of the campaign.
Yep.
I
And
have to bring it down here. And so, yeah, so my some of my NPCs make less than optimal decisions because
well,
they
it's
just
also,
work with the
yeah, and
information at hand.
exactly, and
Yeah,
also their intelligence and wisdom score plays in. Meaning, if you have someone, meaning an undead
hmm,
skeleton, would not make a wise decision at all, because they basically have no wisdom and intelligence. So they
right.
would just
It's
do
yeah,
what they're animated. Meaning, if there's an enemy close and there's someone they're supposed to kill, they would just mindlessly do it, whatever. So and animals might simply go flight or fight instinct, so to speak, and it would be a spur of the moment. If there's more enemies or whatever, and they might spook easily. And then you have some that are vicious, and some are very wise and take the long term. So I try to use intelligence and wisdom on the score, so to speak. So the higher, the more of the world they understand and know, and the longer they can think, and they can think many times, and they try to fool, and meaning a low wisdom creature would never try to fool you in any advanced way, so to speak. And they can, wise and smart creatures can lie if they by have the alignment for
mhm.
it and stuff like that. So yeah. So
So let's kind
it's
of
in.
circle back a
Mhm.
little bit
Yep.
into the Great Kingdom. And so, for example, if you want to run an adventure around, what's the Vampire Lord that you had in your campaign?
Ferdinand. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say you have this super powerful Vampire Lord. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that character, like Strahd, could probably kill the characters outright,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
unless they're super high level. You know, what, he's a vampire, so is it just bloodlust? What's his driving motivation?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then who are the people he sends out to go do his bidding? Because he
Mm-hmm.
can't be in daylight.
Yeah, he has an
Um,
assistant called
yeah,
Shadwell that is an illusionist, if I
right,
remember correctly. Hang on a second here. He is no, he's another necromancer, 11th level necromancer. So yep.
right. Okay, but so if you're a low level venturing party, you're probably not going to run into those guys unless they're just going to come to tell you you're going to do this for me or else.
Or they
That
might want
that's
to
not so
recruit
much.
them, and they might want to come in, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
instead of killing the players, they might realize that under false pretenses, they might try and recruit them, use someone else to come in and recruit them on something that benefits them or whatever. So yeah.
or for some reason those player characters have the ability to get something that they need that they can't get,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and so they'll do false pretenses, or they'll
Hmm.
just straight up say, "I'll make a deal with you,"
Yep.
you know, and then the players have a choice to make, about and what they choose to do in that. Now you're giving people opportunities, and it's not like, oh, there's going to be this direct confrontation, we're all going to die.
Yep.
It's how do we that Ferdinand is here, there be dragons, and we need to be careful, but what do they want? And if you
Hmm.
can get into that curious mode about figuring out what those people want and what their motivations and desires are, now you can actually build an adventure around
Hmm.
that.
Yep.
Your players can engage in that. And you got to give them some minions that your players can either work with or kill or subvert or whatever. Are all of Zephyr's followers on the same page, and all team Ferdinand the Vampire,
Hmm.
or do
Yep.
they have their own motivations
Yep.
that you can subvert and make use of
Hmm.
in your attempt to get by that? What's your relationship to this guy? Is there any other than that he's between you and something you need?
Hmm.
Or
Yep.
does he have something you need,
Yep.
and you need to give him something to get it?
Yep.
And so there's, because brute force isn't going to take it, and so that can be its own adventure. And
Hmm.
these are the kind of things that you start to think about, and this is where the Great Kingdom can be really, really useful to
Hmm.
you. Is it's a different style of play than, say, Saltmarsh, or
Yeah. And
or you're where it's kind of more linear. You're
hmm.
you're you're ramping up threats,
Yeah.
and you're moving from place to place in a level appropriate way. It's it's a different style of play.
Yeah. And you can
It
also.
certainly, in terms of
Yeah.
the Paizo Adventure Pass,
Hmm.
or
Yep.
even or Age of Worms, for example. Everything was kind of in this one progression. You went from place to place, and it had
Yep.
rails.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
another type of gameplay that is really cool that you can that's well suited in the Great Kingdom Air. It's high diplomacy. If you want to have you're going to go to parties, tournaments, and intrigue at the opera, intrigue at the theater, and conferences, and courtships, and court intrigues, and masquerades, and
mhm.
all sorts of cool stuff that way. Then if you want to have like a costume drama with all the hidden sublayer of intrigue, and hidden violence and murders and stuff like that, then I think that is also an area with that type of campaign stories could play out perfectly.
Sure. Hey, let's ask. Does
Yeah,
the
I
audience
was
have
going
any
to say
questions about? Yeah.
exactly.
Does the audience have any questions about the Great Kingdom,
Yep.
or
So we can.
Alyssa, or the South Province that you want to talk about?
Yep.
Is there, you know, I mean, we've talked about a lot of different stuff here, um, and we've talked about DM styles. We've talked about the history, you know, in a very big overview.
Very very big
Yeah.
overview. Yeah.
But if
Yep.
there's like specific questions you have, we'll try to answer it. If we
Hmm.
don't know the answer to it, we can look it up
We can see
and
if, yeah, we will
answer it
see
in a
if.
later.
We see if we can get Gary Julian to come
Yeah.
on the show and give us a good rundown on this, because he's the expert. And if not, then we can go in a little bit on the other topic. I want to, because I can't stay away from maps, you know me, and so I have some ideas. We have about 40 minutes or so. Oh, okay. How is Rel Astra holding their position in the area? That's a very, very good question. And something, first of all, let's go back and show, so everyone gets to see where Rel Astra is. Rel Astra is one of these. There was a bunch of
Hmm.
rels, meaning, I think it means city or something in Old Iridian, because there is a bunch of rels in meaning big cities or metropolises in the former Great Kingdom, and Rel Astra is one of the biggest ones,
And
and yeah, and it's on the coast,
I
on the
believe
east
that
coast there.
Sargent said that it was the original seat of power for the Artie before they
Yes.
created the Great Kingdom.
Yep, they started out here
So it
as
has a
Unsea
yeah.
and
So it
Rel
has a
Astra.
ton of history. It
Yep.
has a lot of history.
Yep, and it's a port city or port metropolis in the size of Greyhawk, like up to maybe 50, 80,000, 100,000 people. So it's one of the biggest cities in the Flannies. So it's very much like old Rome or something in that way. It's a huge ancient city that has been around for I think the better part of 2,000 years at the Greyhawk Wars timeline. It's been, and afterwards, according to the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer, they basically just say that we don't want to be part of any conflict, and they were probably rich and powerful enough, so they simply say we're going to defend this little area and stay by ourselves. So they, and in order to better do that, they ganged up with their neighboring cities. So it's the Solnor Compact were the Free City of Roland. It's slightly smaller, and then the other one, the center one, was Unzi, or however you pronounce it, another metropolis here, and Rel Astra. So these three cities that was on the coast, they basically ganged up and say that we are going to ally with each other and form an alliance to stay out of the power struggle between North Kingdom and Kingdom of Elissa, or the United Kingdom of Elissa, after when the Great Kingdom fell apart.
And they could trade with the Sea Barons, so there's fishing, so they have resources, and there is geography around them. To the south of them, it's essentially
this is an area that should be developed way more, probably, because I don't think that these cities existed in vacuum. So if I go, the only name I found was a little place here that was mentioned. So if I go into campaign in this area, I will invent towns and castles and palaces, and this will be a vibrant area full of settlements and stuff along the coast here, because it's probably it's probably one of the best real estate locations in the Flanders. So I'm pretty sure that, and this island and others here, it's full of stuff, and that's where they got their rich. But then you have the other but before I go to that, we have Scott and Kanan came with an awesome good question. Rel Astra, remember that there was a short-lived D&D comic from Kinzer and Company that was set in Rel Astra. Do you know anything about that?
I have not read the comic. I haven't really read a lot of the D&D comics, so I'm not really sure what they had in there. So I don't really have any opinion on that.
Bavik seems Bavik confirmed that was the case. That's super interesting. Now I need to dig in and see what I can find about that. That's awesome. Thank you, Scott and Kainen and Bavix, for that. That is it's awesome, because this is really cool hot stuff. But what I'm going to
I'll say. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. So what I'll say about Rel Astra is that it doesn't have the Holy See in the south anymore to threaten it. That got obliterated in the Greyhawk Wars, and so that was a big problem. Roxas is not really projecting out power very far away from the city itself.
Yeah.
And the Kingdom of Elissa, they first have to basically pacify. How do you say the word again? Medigia, however you say it.
Medigia, that's how I say it, but it's from a Swedish standpoint. So
yeah. You have to pacify that before you can even get there.
Yeah,
there isn't a whole lot. Yeah, the North Kingdom has other fish to fry. So as long as they're not a threat, and and they're willing to trade, I think they're okay.
Yeah,
and they can trade. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say the interesting thing is, from a geographical perspective, Rel Astra used to be centrally located in the middle of the Great Kingdom, but now when it fell apart and you got a northern and a southern sphere, all of a sudden it became a distant from the two power bases. So that's actually in both.
Right.
It's good to stay out of the trouble, but it's bad for business and stuff. So they
you could treat it like a very large Casablanca, because both sides could be kind of meeting there, and there could be intrigue there. That would be an interesting take on it. Again, I don't know much about the comic, but what I'm saying is what you decide to do with it and how you position it, that's what it's going to be. Now, there's Wu-Tang Peglet has something about Hexer, but prior to that, Scotty Kynan was asking about, well, you have to be this tall to adventure in the Great Kingdom with, all this stuff running around. I think that is really a decision you have to make as a DM. You really want to have a bunch of devils running around marauding. I mean, they're not as bad as having demons running around, which are basically killing machines. but devils are pretty beefy,
Well, yeah,
but then again,
but you have
but
a
one of
lot
the
of
things you can
noble
say,
people too, and city guards, and all the
right,
low
and
and thieves
animuses, and
guilds, and yeah.
yeah.
So there's everything from devils and animuses and 20 level wizards and stuff like that at the top to normal local thieves guilds and highway robbers and all. Especially nowadays when
To kind of
yeah, go on.
Yeah, to get to the heart of that is that during the Great Hawk Wars, yes, the Great Kingdom was super dangerous to be traveling because you had no idea. It'd be like being in Westeros during the Seven Kingdoms battle,
Hmm.
where people are just getting slaughtered. But at some point, when you have quote unquote the peace, or at least the Cold War that's going on between the North and South Province, and the northern and southern provinces, and what's left of Roxas, there has to be essentially a steady state world where there is some sort of new normal.
Hmm.
And if people can't travel, if people can't grow food, the whole thing falls apart. So there has to be something that functions.
Yeah, and
Now,
now I'm going
there,
to. Oh, go on.
yeah, go ahead.
I would
No, no,
say
and so,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so one of I want to tie into that new normal because I want to ask you a question, and also the people in
Mm-hmm.
chat. Are there trade with other parts of Earth? Because one of the interesting thing is you have one of the biggest cities, a coastal city around here. Of course they trade with their neighbors north and south, and the Sea Barons and Lendor Isle and that. But then you and down here to Dullstrand and stuff. And but then you have Scarlet Brotherhood that would cut off the trade further south. But maybe Relastra can have on speak at least on trading terms with the Scarlet Brotherhood. I don't know, but the interesting thing is, it do are they Relastra big enough that they actually send ships like to Fireland or to other parts of the world, of the wider world? That's an interesting thing that each DM I guess have to because there is nothing mentioned in any of the sources that I've read of trade with even Fireland.
Yeah. So again, that's going to be your decision about what that city plays in your campaign.
Yeah.
Y- You know, eh, you know, so I don't think there's one answer to that question. I think because it's not super detailed, you have a lot of room to play in that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
what is it you want it to be? Um, I'll say this is that they certainly would probably have trade with the uh, the the Kingdom of Lissa,
Yeah.
because
Lord Grendewolf
if they
has a. Oh,
because
sorry.
yeah, I say just because if you want to get anything from the western part of the Flanaeus, you're gonna have to go through them, because otherwise you have to run the blockade with the Scarlet Brotherhood with the way things are
Yep.
set up post wars.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not running post wars, you different different thing entirely.
Yep.
But or if you change the wars and how it went, different thing. But
Mm-hmm.
again, that's a personal decision about how you want that to happen.
Yep.
All right.
And
So,
and
and
Lord
then
Grendenwolf has a good point that it says Relastro also had a history of using orc privateers. That's a cool thingy. Hmm.
from the gold box. Okay.
Yep. It's interesting to see that there are stuff like that, and that's something you can run wild with if you want to in your campaign. It's kind of super cool. And then, like Scott and Candy say, Spelljammer, then you have a third dimension and you can go run wild in the gray space and run with it. So yeah, now we have
Or
a
if you
oh,
decide to
go on.
do a high magic campaign,
Hmm.
can they just like, for instance, so like in the Ghost of Saltmarsh, I know this is gonna be a topic in a day, but we're talking about sea trade. There are rules for ships, and you can have just normal kind of medieval style ships,
Hmm.
but there's also upgrade rules where you could have a living ship from the lands of fairy that were built on the woods that came from that land, and it's a living ship. And there's all kinds of little things you can do that will be more fantasy oriented and a
Hmm.
little more higher fantasy than this kind of medieval human centric thing that we've had a lot in Greyhawk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it really depends on the kind of campaign you want to run. If you want to do
Yep.
Spelljammer and kind
Hmm.
of have
Yep.
the space travel piece, there's that too.
Yep.
You could also incorporate Planescape, and then like so, who has a portal into Sigil, and what do they get from that? That you have Do you have trade with the Nine Hells because they've made deals with the devils?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do the devils have a foothold in the Great Kingdom, and is their trade?
Yep.
You know, do you send mercenary companies to go fight in the Blood War? There's all kinds of things you can take on there if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But is that what people have written? No, but these are possibilities for you to take with the campaign with your players if that's what they're interested in.
Yep.
So I think, you know,
Now I'm going
so
to.
that
Yep.
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, now I'm going to just, while you're talking, I'm just going to move over to the next slide, because this is a good segue into the next topic. So while you're talking, I'm
Okay,
just going to
I'll
spin this little thing
briefly,
here.
sure. I'll briefly talk about Hexor. I've been doing a little reading on that. It's Greyhawk religions are not super tied to various lands and not really done with a lot of detail for the most part. I mean, we have the
Mm-hmm.
Theocracy of the Pale, obviously, that is the land of Foltis.
Yeah.
Iva the Undying talks about the priesthood of Hexor being in the Sea of Meglia, and that, you know, they were part and parcel of the Great Kingdom. But there's also devils, and there was like some weird devilish incarnation that was a god, you know, supposedly a god of trade. You know, how does that fit in with the Zilchus? You know, there's all kinds of things going on. I think that what you have to do is figure out what the gods mean to you in terms of Greyhawk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do they tread the earth like the original box set talked about? With a lot, there's a lot of gods walking around on Earth
Mm-hmm.
in the box set. Um, you know, that we moved away from that as time went on. But, you know, like I said, you know, are the powers independent of humans and other mortal races, or are they, is it like American Gods where it's the belief in them that brings them power and make, or do they die and go to the astral sea if they don't have worshipers?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, there's all kinds of things you got to ask yourself about that. I would say that Zilchus, as far as the way things have been written by Sargent and then later carried on by Greyhawk, Zilchus, Hexor, and Foltis, not so much, are kind of like the big gods in that land,
Mm-hmm.
and with, you know,
Yeah.
obviously some devils and maybe some of the other evil gods, considering the nature of the land. Uh, a lot of the worship of Heronius basically moved to the hinterlands, like Nairon, Almor. You know, they weren't really welcome when the empire turned evil,
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
so and they're pretty much non-existent in the Iva the Undying. You know, Sargent really didn't talk about them. So I mean, there's, you know, but again, what kind of campaign do you want to run? What do the
Yep.
role do the gods play in your campaign?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
and that's really the how, you know, you're not going to have one answer to that, because Gygax certainly didn't lock it down. He didn't want to be tied down. You know, to him, it was more important to leave a lot of wiggle room,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I could tell,
Yep.
you know, so that he can tell the stories he wanted to tell. You know, because if you write everything down, you close yourself off from the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
anyway,
Now I'm going to go back,
so
because
what did you want to?
I'm going to just show up, because we talked a little bit about trade and stuff from Rel Astra. So I'm going to take a look. This is, just to explain it, this is my first experimental take on Earth, the globe, so to speak. So I'm, because I need to
Oh,
start.
cool.
So the first area that I'm detailing really well is the Lendor Isles, and in order to start detailing more and more areas, I need to know exactly where they are, and in order to figure that out properly, I need to make a model of the whole planet, so I can then simply pinpoint and say the Lendor Isles are located here, and the Flannies are here, etc., etc. So I need to so this is my take on it. This is not final by any means. This is very much a work in progress. This is an early. So what I've done is that I've taken the city of Greyhawk is on the prime meridian here, and I've used
It's Geneva time.
yeah, exactly. It's Geneva time, so or Greenwich time. So yeah, so depending on what
Right.
area of the world. Before it was like Ross's, but I'm basing this on the 598 kind of after when the Greyhawk kind of took over as the primary source for research and science and
Hmm.
cartography and stuff. So this is yeah Greyhawk mean time. Perfect. Yep, that's perfect. Lord Grendenwolf, that's perfect. And also I have this is the polar circle, which is in on Earth is since the Earth tilt is like 30 degrees instead. So this is instead of the or 27, I forgot which, but actually anyway the polar circles are larger because the actual tilt is larger of Earth than it is on of planet Earth. What I've done though is
Hmm.
that I've used the size of the regular Earth because there is like a 400 or 500 mile something 400 just under 400-mile difference in the circumference of Earth compared to the real Earth. But with that much of a difference, it's only a percentage or so, or not even that. It's like roughly half a percentage difference. So I simply skip that difference. I'm going to use the real Earth measurements for circumference and radius and stuff like that, and the how round it is and so on, because that way I can use all the regular tools. I don't have to make up my own model. It simplifies everything, and I can use things, I can display things and so on using regular GIS tools. So I'm going to oversee with those couple of 100 miles difference and skip them and use it. So but this is a simpler, this is a pure sphere because I just want to experiment a bit and see. So what I've done is if we zoom out here, so the basic model is the Flanies based on my map with the outlines, and then we have the I've taken the liberty of interpreting from a whole bunch of earlier versions of, because there's like at least 5 major different versions of Earth that I found. And so my idea have been to be inclusive rather than exclusive. And one of the major things when it comes to that is that there are talks of a great southern continent, and on some maps that continent is here. But then on the other maps there is this huge continent in the eastern Solnor, or in the middle of Solnor, however you see it. If you see it from the Flanies perspective, it's the eastern, but if you look at the whole ocean, it's placed in the middle. And I shrunk this down a bit because it used to be this continent or this continent. So the great southern continent were either in the middle of things and were about this big to this big. And I kind of like the idea of having both of them. So for my working model at the moment, I actually put this one up here in the middle and a great southern continent down here. That is huge. It's roughly the size of Hepmona land. And then we have Fireland up here. It's not detailed or anything. So Carlos, if you're still watching this, this is where we can kind of see if we can do more in the future. But this is where I put Fireland. I put Fireland on the polar circles, just yeah, the name of some of these are interesting because the name of it's been called Antaria, and meaning both these continents are kind of sometimes probably the same continent, sometimes it's one or the other, but I'm kind of more interested in having both of them simply because you can't have too much landmass, but there's enough oceans anyway to you can sail for weeks and months on, and you can house enough water sea dragons and all sorts of monsters in them anyway. So this is big as the Pacific as it is. So but anyway, so yeah, exactly. This continent here is Frank's Antaria. Yeah, that's the it's not modeled on his Antaria because as far as I know, and I signed it.
Aquaria.
Yeah, Antaria or Aquaria. I think it was. Hang on a second. I have.
Aquaria.
Yeah, I think, but he had another name. Let's see here. He had. Now I need to Google that. So hang on a second here.
Yeah. Well, suffice to say, you have
Yeah, but
stuff that other people have produced that you're going to
yeah,
try to incorporate.
yeah. Now I just need to do this and move that away, and I'm going to Google it while I'm talking here. So let's see.
Well, it's amazing with the globe.
Imperia.
It kind of gives you a perspective on where things are.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah, Imperia was the name that Frank Menser had on this continent, but Antaria is another name, and there is a third name that I like the most that I've seen mentioned here, and that is Ankeris. And that's the one I'm going to use. But on the other hand, now I have two continents that I need to name. So I'm going to call the Great Southern Continent Ankeris in my take on it. So I forgot where it is, but I'm going to do some more research and post on the Flanies Geographical Society more articles and on my website and first to my patrons. The more I dig into this, this is just early tech work to just lay the foundations, and then I have to do more research, and I don't need to nail these down yet. But it's something that I want to do in the future, because when I need to have the idea of where these things are first, and once then it can be years, but it's kind of cool to flirt with the idea a bit, especially since I now need to make a model so I can just flesh it out a little bit. So this southern continent, I've heard the name of Ankeris, and I like that name more than any of the other names. And then you have a little polar region here that is meant on most maps. There is a little south pole, actually, just like in the real world there is a bit of a south pole. And then we have, but if we look at the if we follow and then we have Hepmonaland, that is the one that is well mapped already in the Scarlet Brotherhood. That is a decent map, and actually a good one of Hepmonaland. So this, I'm just using that as my model. I've added this little blob here because there are some blobs on some of the other maps, so I want to be inclusive. I want to include things rather than cherry pick, because I want to have more rooms for people to map, so, or to place things in them, so to speak. And this is blobbies I haven't detailed, but then you have all sorts of stuff down here in the down, I forgot the name, the Azure Z, and so there's plenty of islands and stuff.
the Azure Sea, yeah.
Yeah, and here you have the Isle of Dread down here, and some of the other ones, and then it goes on, and there's the Nippon, I think this is called in some areas. I don't like these names at all. And then you have this is, I'm not really sure what this peninsula sticking out here, but you have if we go north, we have here's the Beclunish East. Oh, it's normally in the Flanies it's called the Beclunish West, but if you take the Beclunish area, and especially if you go into what Joe Block have done, then this area here is the Beclunish area. So then what is the Beclunish West seen from the Flanies, it's actually the Beclunish East. So you have the Beclunish West over here, and you have more islands and stuff going up here. And then the west end of the Dravmid Ocean is kind of interesting, because in some areas this is actually an opening here, but I kind of like the idea that you had a land bridge over to the northern continent. For it's kind of cool, because some maps there is a land bridge between the northern area here, and whatever you do, it becomes enormous. So here you have an enormous northern frozen tundra kind of polar ice world up here in the north. So I'm envisioning in my campaign I can have things
so I have a question for you, Anna.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different people that have developed different things. There's the chainmail setting. There's stuff that Joseph Block is doing. There's stuff that Frank has done. There's stuff that I know that Carlos is doing with Fireland.
Yep.
There's all this different stuff that people want to create. Your map can support that, but are you going to just show the geography and let people lay down their own boundaries and culture stuff on there?
Yep.
So you're not going to really map out like you have with the Flanaeus, where we actually have like really definitive things. You're just
exactly. My plan. Okay. Yeah, my plan when I go outside of the Flanies is to only provide the terrain. I want to provide the landscape, and I will look at as much as possible from what other people have done and try to make a landscape
Hmm.
that can accommodate all that stuff. So when I move in, and we have to realize these areas are enormous. Just the continent of Werik is as big as the Eurasia plus North America combined. It goes around, if you look at it, it goes from here 2/3 around the globe, or almost 3/4 around. It's 2/3 around the globe. It's going from Alaska all the way over North America, the Atlantic, and almost all the way over to Asia. So it's enormous. And if you take this into account, it's simply enormous. So this continent alone, meaning this area here, is bigger than Siberia. So there is like an enormous amount of land that you can, and when that's one of the problems. If I take the areas that are written, the empires and stuff, meaning those empires are the size of America or China, most of them, that are countries, meaning they're the size of the whole Flannies. So what I will do is that I will try and make terrain that is fantastic but still kind of believable, and then people can, I will try to make empires and stuff like that could fit, and then people can make them the size they want, so to speak, and they can simply take it as a sandbox to put whatever. If they want to have Europe and the Empire of Lynn and all the cool stuff from all the other, they can put that in there, so to speak, and make their own versions of it. That's my, because I don't want to to kind of nail down, especially in things that I haven't read much about and there isn't much written and stuff. So I want to create a
And
lot of
it gives the
cool
setting
and good.
room to breathe. So if you
Exactly.
have an
Yeah.
idea,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yep. So here, for instance, I want to
Hmm.
make this kind of polar region where you can go wild with volcanoes coming out in the ice, and there can be tundras up here. There's a large area of tundras where you can have woolly mammoths and woolly rhinoceros, and why not even bigger elephants and stuff like that, and white dragons hunting them and whatever. There is a lot of room there, meaning there's so much to do. So I can map this for decades before I've mapped everything in detail. But the tool's getting better and better. So there is there's a whole bunch of possibilities here. So I will of course not map everything, and I'll probably never get to the whole bit, but I will probably flesh out more and more. And Hipmona Land is next in my targets because that one has a lot more detail to it. So my goal is to try and map Hipmona Land as well as I map the Flannies. And one of the benefits is that Hipmona Land is detailed, but not down to the level of detail from the Flannies. So I have, like, there is a desert down here, which means that I can do some cool deserty things, meaning there's hardly anything mentioned. So that gives me as a cartographer way more leeway to come up with cool things and just fill it. And I also want to make sure that areas that are fantastic, meaning we're talking mountains that are more than 10 kilometers high and stuff like that. So there are room for some fantasy elements. So I want to introduce areas that are beyond what would be on planet Earth that we see in the real world, just to see. So this is kind of a
Hmm.
baseline to place things and to start giving an idea of what I want. And what I see when a lot of people, because I'm not the first one doing this, and I get people presenting new super cool ideas for doing the same thing, basically to take the Darlene map and the Flannery's map and put that on the globe. And their approach is usually to take the Darlene map and then apply all the cartography science of putting it into some sort of projection that seems to work, and so you can figure out exactly how large each hex is and stuff. To me, that's not the approach I want to use. I don't treat Darlene map or any of the maps, and including my own Flanese map, as absolute accurate. My own Flanese map is closer to it, but I will tweak and twist that one too. So I treat them more, especially the old kind of stylistic fantasy maps like Darlene map that are beautiful to look at, but I don't treat them as accurate. I treat them like you would do old medieval maps that were full of here there be monsters, and the cartographer kind of drew more imaginative stuff to make something that could impress on that hung on a king's wall next to his throne or something like that, to show all the cool lands he ruled over or wanted to rule over, had explored, or something like that. And so I don't treat them as accurate in a cartography sense, but I treat them as inspiration, and then I will
Yeah.
go out and create lands that are accurate, and then have to
Hmm.
reverse engineer them into fantasy maps again. So yeah.
Yeah. So I bought a book on maps last year, and
Hmm.
what it is it's this human need to put things that aren't there on a map.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
So it's all these are literal maps that people created, that people were actually navigating
Hmm.
by before we had GPS and whatnot,
Yep.
and people took it as gospel.
Hmm.
And these places did not exist, but someone put it on there,
Yeah.
and some of it was just pure error, and some of it was just like, I don't know, that
Yeah.
just people get these weird ideas and they
Hmm.
put things on there that they believe it to be true.
Yep.
And so maps are, as one person has put it, maps are not the territory. you know
Exactly, and
uh
it's they always
yeah.
have a purpose, and that's why I need to down the line develop, because there is a I see a clear gaming need both for my style of maps that I've done for the Flannies, and starting to do in the
Hmm.
future really accurate maps to that actually show what visualize the what the land looks like. But there's also a gaming need for maps that looks like Darlene maps, or Jonathan Roberts' beautiful renditions, or Devin Rue's awesome
Yeah,
hand
more
painted.
representational.
Exactly, and because they are the kind of map, if the characters go to Greyhawk City, or some other big city like Relaster or something, and go and try a buy a map of the Flannies, that's that's the type of map they will get, like Devon Rue's map, or Darlene's map, or something like that. Darlene's map
Hmm.
without the hexes, I think, because I don't see the hexes as something they would do. Maybe they in Greyhawk they might do hex overlays that being so integrated, but I see they would not get my map, will not be bought. It's not an in-game prop. So you need both, and more types of maps, and then you need the spread maps and all that. But I want to have the terrain visualization, because that's the way as a DM I can envision what the world looks like and describe details and use that in game, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so yep. So okay, yeah, the Church of Hextor produced maps with hexes. I totally agree, Scott and Kenyon. That's perfect. That was that awesome. That was great. So we can blame the
Nice
Church of
one.
Hextor. Yep, Hextor for that. So yep, that is awesome. But so this is the idea, and some of the my kind of what I work for from when it comes to it. And I have one little area that I mentioned once before, and it's the this little speck of land here that is my addition to my version of Earth. It's a set of islands that are some 1,000 miles or something like that out in the Sol North, way south of the Fireland. So they're kind of away from the most things, but they're out there, and I call them the Estold Islands, and they come from my first or my second Patreon projects. Before I had refocused my Patreon to be uh, focused on Greyhawk, I just wanted to have more kind of a map technical perspective. And one of the projects was to create a really, really detailed map. And simply created a set of made up islands. And I realized that these islands now they don't really have a purpose, so I put them in the on the Earth. So that's where I have them, and I named them Estold Islands. And there are some cool um, places and things on them, including I mentioned that in one of the previous ones that I presented some of the before. But it's one of the it's a brewery, a bunch of monks that have a brewery that they only make a brew every 100 years, and it's the best one ever. And so there might be kind of merchants from Relastra coming there every 100 years to buy some of these bottles and sell them for a fortune. And yeah, so there might be some. It's close enough that you can make the journey, but far away enough that you don't do it lightly. So that's my
So you
little
basically
take.
You made Midway.
Yeah, exactly. I made yeah, and let's see here if I have the islands here, and
Oh,
yeah,
the answer about the Karatura is that's actually a Realms version of Oriental Adventures,
yeah,
which essentially is their
mm-hmm,
Asian adventure set. Uh, I believe first edition had a different name, and yeah, but it's here's the thing about anything that's in the Forgotten Realms. You don't have to use it wholesale, but you can certainly steal the heck out of it.
definitely yes. And there's
Yeah, I
so
mean,
yeah,
I know that people stole stuff from Al Qadim,
mm-hmm,
which is also set in the realms to
yeah,
use to develop stuff for the Bakalunish empires. By all means, steal everything you can.
mm-hmm,
You know,
yeah,
there is good ideas everywhere, whether it's within the D&D game system or outside of it.
yeah,
I've talked about Stars Without Number, powered by the Apocalypse games. There's a lot of great ideas, even Fate. And there are great game worlds. I know you've worked on Midgard, Anna, doing
yeah,
maps for, is that Kobold, I
yeah,
believe?
mm-hmm,
Uh, the Midgard, yeah, yeah. So look for the things that you can use. Like,
yeah,
when this new thing comes out in September, I'm going to steal the heck out of Descent into Avernus
mm-hmm,
for something.
yeah,
It's just
definitely,
too
yeah,
cool of an
mm-hmm,
idea
yeah,
to leave it in the Forgotten Realms alone.
yeah,
There's plenty of ways to adapt that stuff, even if I only use a portion of it. And just like the maps, give your don't fill everything in. Give yourself some room to breathe, where you can bring stuff in that can make Greyhawk your own.
mm-hmm,
You
yep,
know, and make it so that it lives,
mm-hmm,
and that it has some flex.
yep,
Don't try to have everything. And I think on it, it's going to have it's going to be more kind of like this Gygaxian idea, where you have the center super detailed, and
mm-hmm.
as the farther you go out, the less detailed it's going to be,
Yeah, and
and that
also
you're
yeah,
going to have room to do your own stuff.
and even if it's
Yeah,
detailed, I'm
good.
not going to put labels on it or tell you what's there more than make cool terrain that you can simply you do
And
whatever
that's
you
kind of what
want
I'm
with.
talking about.
Yeah, mm-hmm, yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the idea, because a lot of the stuff that I read, like, these are too earthly for me, and I don't like them much. But the terrain, I can come up with new cool things. And here's an example of it's the island map from Isometric, because this is a true 3D model of it, so to speak. And I like the
Which
Robilar
one?
80 had a cool idea that the Esthold Isles might have been the ultimate goal when they were found the Lendor Isles, that they were looking for the isles that were further out or something like that. So we'll see. So that's some of the these are the isles, and this is the little isle where the monks have the monastery, and the monastery is actually there. It's detailed, these little things here, and there are some little roads going down here, and these are actually detailed. So I think it's about 30 feet per pixel. So
Jesus.
yeah, so these are detailed down to 30 feet per pixel. So this is this is the kind of this was the first tech demo of what I wanted the future maps to look like, and they are technically not bad by any means. But I this is something I did 3 years ago almost, or 2 years ago. So it's 3 years old setup, and the Lendor Isles this I learned a lot from this. So now when I'm mapping the Lendor Isles, now I'm using all I learned here, and then some in the past 2 years. So Lendor Isles will be way better than this, but it will be basically using this setup and refined version of this. So there will be rivers and tiny rivulets and forests and stuff. So, and there's some if you go here, let's see, there's little wizard's tower here somewhere, if I remember correctly. I can't find it. It's on one of the little hills here, but there are some other stuff by this here. There is some zoom in. Here are some little fortress, and there's a road, bridge, and there's some inns and a couple other houses here. And so you can actually go and see, here's a little village with some houses here, and the road going through the forest and stuff. So this is kind of a vision of the detailed map I want to have in to map out detail areas, to have like the Nulb, for instance, and you can see the whole way from Fairbobonk to Nulb, and you can see every nook and cranny, and you can kind of put down your own little cool locations and stuff. So that's the idea, and this is my first test of it. It's by no means perfect, but it's a good start. And it's not. I've made some mistakes in coloration and stuff, but it's getting there. So yep, it's getting there.
Looks really good.
Yep, thank you. So
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
And the 3D model of this is a start for making that happen with the mapping of the area. But I'm really stoked up north. There's a lot of islands, and which means that there's connections between here, and because in the winter there might be ice and stuff going almost all the way down. So there's some polar connections going from the Theronian Peninsula, and the land of black ice and stuff is probably frozen all the way up to the polar region here, and also have here. So there's some interesting connections, and it opens up for possibilities in gameplay and stuff that you can play with in your campaign.
Hmm.
Okay, let's see here. Have I missed something in chat and stuff? Because now we have 2 hours, so I need to go fairly soon. So we need to wrap up in not too. Oh, Lord Grindelwolf
I
has
think
a lot. There is a bunch of different versions. You can have forks, and like you can have Urth, Worth, Yorth, or Urf, or Aerth, and all sorts of versions. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. It's like Gary himself did when he kind of forked it and called it different versions and tweaked
and
it.
I conceptualize Greyhawk as a campaign world where every DM's version of it is a different realm, a different possibility,
Yep.
multiple possibilities of it, and they all exist simultaneously. Just they're in their own little worlds, and maybe there's
Mm-hmm.
connections to them, and there's
Yep.
not.
Yep.
You can do the whole Star Trek mirror episode and have the goatee laden evil guy show up like uh, they did in the expedition to Castle Greyhawk, and there's all kinds of fun things you can do. And one of the things to remember is that in OD&D Dungeons and Dragons, they were a lot looser because they weren't producing a campaign world, so they were on Mars, all of John Carter,
Mm-hmm.
and adventuring there, and they did the whole Alice in Wonderland thing, and even though they did eventually publish that because it was in the public domain,
Yep.
but it that style where you have fun with it and you can do a lot of different genres
Mm-hmm.
with it. There's a lot of room in Greyhawk,
Yep.
to do that kind of thing.
Yep.
And it may not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's a place for it. And
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to find your version of Greyhawk and make it,
Yep. Make
because
it your own. That's the point.
and then come and report back to us.
Hmm.
Go on the
Exactly, and
Facebook groups.
Greyhawk Online
Go
is a
on.
perfect spot to
Yeah,
write down an article and
exactly.
write down your cool version of it and stuff. So, yep. And
There's a new version of the Oworth Journal that's going to be
hmm.
coming out. If you
Yep.
want to write for that,
Yep.
you want to write up some stuff that you've done,
Hmm.
by all means.
Yep. And I'm
It's
not.
your version.
Yeah, I'm not only going to talk my own maps, because this is Dewey Carthan, Rick Miller, I think is his name, and he made a
Yep.
version that is really cool of, and because I want to tie into GF PG70s, asked like, isn't the northern polar region Hyperborea? And yes, that's what it's been labeled in, and you have the Sea of Hyperborea here. So this is, I like what he did up here, and then you have Jotunheim Sea, and that's a little bit too close to home for me. It's actually Jotunheim is a place in Norway, so it's kind of not far from where I grew up. So my mother lives like 100 miles from there. So Jotunheim. So that's the simply the home of the giants in Old Norse. but it's kind of it's kind of cool. But Hyperborea, I don't like the name much, but that's the name that they often call. And then you have a whole bunch. Some of these names I like, and some of them don't. But I'm going to steal a lot of the inspiration from here, and but a lot of these areas are so large that they need to be subdivided into different types of terrain and stuff like that. But some of these huge mountain chains and stuff are irresistible for me. But one of the interesting things is that almost all the mountain chains on Earth seems to go north to south, and that might be just like they do in North America. They go north to south, but in Europe and Eurasia they seem to go east to west. So it's kind of an interesting thing that. But on the other hand, there are plenty that goes in every direction here, so it's okay. But I kind of like this map for it's in many ways the best one done, so to speak, and it's kind of cool. So you have a whole, but the problem here is that most of these empires are so large that it's kind of, yeah, it's enormous. But it's kind of cool. So I used a lot of inspiration from here for my map. So yep.
Nice.
Okay. Yep. Now I missed.
And
See if we have a final round in the chat here. So
yeah, you know, I think just to sum up, I mean, we started kind of small. We talked about Alyssa. We talked about the
mm-hmm.
Southern Province. We
Yep.
talked about the Greyhawk Wars, and we kind of got into the bigger Great Kingdom
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yep.
And then we've gone all over the place with this chat.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I just want to say thank you for inviting me. It's been a blast.
Oh yes, yeah, it's
And
been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been fantastic. I have one thing that I want to splash, and that is that I'm working
oh, and
on to.
I have a couple announcements. Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
perfect. Yeah, so I'll
Yeah,
go first then. So to my patrons
yeah.
and stuff, I'm working on to split up the big Flannies map into tiny maps, so every little realm, forest, and mountain chain and stuff. It will be probably 150 or something like that, all in all, splitting up. And there will be a player version and a DM version, and that they are coming fairly soon. I'm probably about three-quarters done. So they will come in within a week or two. That they will come. So for my patrons, and they will come later. And they are the biggest ones are 6,000 pixels, and they are kind of heavily compressed, so you can use them in Realmworks and other campaign manager tools. So they are a version designed for that. And also I have Saltmarsh, the book, coming very very soon. So as soon as I get that one and in my hands, I will make a reverse or like a revision of the Saltmarsh area. So I'll try and match that to the book as much as possible. So that's coming too. So those are the two things that I'm working on. Otherwise, I have to say I'm so sorry that I don't have time to work that much on my Patreon and Greyhawk stuff. I'm right now wrapping up two, or working the last month on two of major things. One for Midgard and for Kobold Press with Midgard, and one is for Gryffindor Games. So once they are done, so after Greyhawk or after Gen Con, it will be basically Greyhawk the rest of the year. So that's the plan. Okay.
So we finally hit over 1,000 members on the Cannon Fire Facebook page. Just look for us there if you want to join up and talk with people on Facebook.
Yeah.
There is also a link to if you go to Greyhawk Online, there's a Discord server
Yep.
for that.
Mm-hmm. I have the
Additionally, there's a
Flannies
Discord
Geographical
server
Society. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And there is also, of course, a Discord server for those that are members of the Greyhawk Online community. If you
Mm-hmm.
want to talk with them, with various people there, um, there's a big community out there. I mean, a lot of different sites.
Yep.
Flannery's Geographical Society. We all kind of work together, trying to support each other.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know, join the conversation, be part of it. It shouldn't just be a few of us. There's a lot of people with ideas, and even if you're just looking for advice and you want to like just test out an idea, that's always a good thing to be talking with people, because there's always someone that will have something you don't know, or a way to attack a problem that you may not have thought of. And I'm really hopeful that the Greyhawk community has been kind of growing again, and we're seeing some really nice stuff come
Hmm.
out of it.
Yep.
And I'd like to continue that process. I mean, and we got our first really official Greyhawk material in Ghost of Saltmarsh, and
It was.
I've read through a lot of it. It's good,
Hmm.
and I'm looking forward to it. Anna and Mike talk about it. Hopefully the next show.
Yeah, well,
And
hopefully Mike is back from sport, the world of sports. I've heard. Yep, that's why he was busy today. Yep,
mhm,
imagine that. You abandon us.
imagine that.
Yeah, for sports. Well, it was
Well,
probably a special event. So yeah,
yeah.
but we have another. Oh, go on, go on.
No, no, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll say we have one special more announcement is that Lord Gazumba on his Twitch channel is going to have next Sunday, the 16th, I think it is. Or yeah, will be this upcoming Sunday if well, Sunday the June 16th. He will have at 7:30 p.m. That will on his channel. There will be Gabbins. He runs on Sunday. He runs a show when he talks about his campaign and stuff. But he invited a whole bunch of Greyhawk people to just talk about Greyhawk in general. So there will be a whole bunch of Greyhawk people and stuff on
Yeah,
his Gabbin show.
Anna and I will be there.
Yep. And
Will
yeah.
Carlos is going to
Yeah,
be
Mike
there.
Bridges will be
Uh,
there, and I yeah he's trying to get as many in the Greyhawk community as he could fit in Zoom, the video tool that we use. So he will try and squeeze as many as possible in. So that will be yep. So it's his
yeah,
50th
yeah.
show too. So that's why he's making a big one. So it's on Sunday the 16th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I think. Well, yep. So that will be so it's out on Lord Gazumba. Lord Gozumba. Yep. Yep. So
Yeah.
that's the one. That was the things that I wanted to plug this week. And again, I'm sorry for not being so active in the Patreon on my Patreon as I want to be, but that will be remedied this fall for sure. Yep. Okay, so
All
now
right.
we've
Well,
done 15 minutes. We 2 hours and 15 minutes, but it's wonderful. Every time you and me babble, we go on for hours. So this was good. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone in chat. It's been awesome. So thank you so much for coming in and helping us out to do this because yeah. I'm just a Greyhawk fan, just like you. So I just love to do it. So
we
this,
all are.
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So this is so much fun. So thank you so much, and we will be back next week with the third show for the season 3, episode 3. So until then, take care and see you next week.
Thank you, and good night.